Well, good evening, all. Let's see if I can figure this out. Once again, Facebook has changed stuff, and I am making an attempt to do my live stream from Tiki Tavern on 49th Street South, and it's like between 5th and 6th on the east side of the street. And so I'm out back. There's a yoga class that's about to start, so hopefully, let's see, they got everything's moved around. I gotta find all of this weirdness. I don't want to share a special link. No, I don't want to share any tips. And I don't even know what a stars party is, so we're going to get that crap out of there. Somebody's here, so feel free to go in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're from. We're going to get started here in 8 minutes or thereabouts. And I have my phone ready in case something gets wonky on us. That's that. How do I scroll that down? I don't know. All right. So if I'm lucky, yay. All right, well, whoever's on there, go ahead and post your questions. Let us know who you are, where you're from. If you're logging on to the recording, feel free to fast forward about 7 or 8 minutes. If you don't know it, I'm Bob Linde from Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies and the Tradition School of Herbal Studies here in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. You can tell it's sunny because I have a huge amount of glare in my eyes, so I can barely see. And I've got a couple of questions to get us started this evening, but please go ahead and type into the chat box in the comments there if you've got any questions, and I will add them into the mix. Hopefully we'll get a few people to join us here. I know the folks who sent their questions in are at work, so they probably won't log in because they want to keep their job. And we're going to have, oops, I don't know, what happens if I expand my video? Ooh, I like the expanded video. All right. Well, I should have worn my hat out here. Well, I'm going to stall and do a little song and dance today until we get started in 6 minutes. And if you didn't catch it before, yay! Herb Day, the 17th annual Herb Day here in St. Petersburg, Florida. We have created it in 1,000 different venues. So Saturday, May 6th, mark it on your calendar. We will be spamming everybody. It's free. It's 10 to 4. We'll have 2 lecture tents going on all day. It'll be a fundraiser for the West Coast chapter of the American Herbalist Guild. There'll be lots of cool plants and other stuff. Hey! Yay, you're my first person, and that also means that I found the chat box easier than usual. So, and if you got any cool questions, Angel, feel free to type them in there. I'll add it into the mix. I gotta find my questions. Oh, there they are. Neuropathy, post-COVID stuff. All right, cool. But Herb Day is a blast, as is always. Yay. And you can come for the day, you can come for an hour, and just check. I think we've got over 20 vendors right now. We're taking over all the street corners. The back, we're going to have 2 different music folks. I'm super happy to say that once again we'll have Barney from the Urban Gypsies of Florida. They have to say that because the Urban Gypsies from somewhere else gave them crap about it. And then we'll have our own, I don't know what Maddie's band name is, but she was a wonderful addition and one of our student graduates. So she will be playing as well as a nice display. Hey Sandy, feel free to post a question and we'll add it to the mix. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. And in the glare as such, I can actually read the chat, but I can't actually tell what time it is. Oh, there we go. Oh, in 4 minutes we'll get started. Oh, we got all kinds of new people on here. So let us know where you're from. Post a question if you like, and I will add it into the mix. Super excited. I see new faces, so maybe we'll get some really interesting, cool questions in here tonight. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. I start right at 6 and babble endlessly for the next 2 hours. Mississippi, outstanding. Oh, hope you managed to avoid all of those tornadoes bebopping through there. That was some scary looking stuff. It looked like Florida after a hurricane. All right. So, oh, you're in my hood. Awesome. Well, if you're close by the Tiki Tavern, I decided to be weird and do it outside at Tiki Tavern. It was too nice to sit inside the clinic tonight. So, and anybody wants, go ahead and post your questions, and I will get started in just a moment. If you don't know it, I'm Bob Linde from the School of Herbal Studies, and I keep losing my cursor. There it is. It's tough with the sun glaring down here. There we go. All right, I think I got it. Yes, I do. All right. So yeah, I'm decided for whatever strange reason, I'm going to sit here at the kava bar. Hopefully the traffic noises aren't too bad. And if I'm really lucky, the sun's going to go down enough that I will not go blind as I'm doing this. And I'm sitting out back in the Tiki Tavern, enjoying kratom. There's another meeting going on inside and people chatting, so I figured this was the place to be. Kind of mix it up. All right. 2 minutes. All right. I try to be timely. See, there's a couple more folks on there. If you're just joining us, feel free to tell us who you are, where you're from, and if you got any questions, feel free to post them, and I will add it into the mix. Hopefully the afternoon traffic will slow down a little bit. And this is a great chance to quiz me on a particular issue: Western herbs, Chinese herbs, Florida herbs, Caribbean herbs, you name it. I probably know something about it, but I will happily say I don't have a clue. That happens every once in a while. If any of you are acupuncturists, I'll say crazy acupuncture words as well, and just to keep it interesting. And if all of a sudden you see a bunch of people walking around behind us or saying cool yoga stuff, it's because I think there's a yoga class starting in just a minute behind us. And if I need to, I'll go hide in the other corner if it gets too loud. And if you're just tuning in, just, if you're checking out the recording, we're going to get started right at 6. So fast forward like 3 minutes or something. All right. I'm going to say that's, it's close enough to 6 o'clock, because I'm going to babble for a few seconds more, and I'm going to do my little station identification. It's the price you pay for free information. So if you don't know it, I'm Bob Linde from School of Herbal Studies and Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies here in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. And it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I do this every month. It's the last Friday of every month from 6 to Georgia. Hey, Robin. From 6 to 8 p.m. And it's kind of just a chance, quiz away. You can post your questions ahead of time, or you can post them here on the chat. If you're got to be at work or can't tune in during the whole thing, you can catch the recording on our YouTube page, on School of Herbal Studies YouTube page. And for anybody who's nearby, and if you're not nearby, that's okay too. All of our classes, I say most of our classes, are both in person, and we offer them live by Zoom. And if you're lucky enough to be in the area, and some of y'all were from here, tomorrow night, I don't have all the details with me. If you check out the Florida chapter of the American Herbalist Guild, the Tampa Bay chapter of the American Herbalist Guild, we've got a cacao factory tour going on tomorrow night up in North Pinellas, and super excited. There is a small fee associated with that to cover all of the chocolate and cacao we're going to eat, and Sarah Ratza will be showing us around her facility and both her retail and wholesale space, and talk to us all about cool cacao, both its traditional uses, how to make it, Its spiritual uses, physical medicine uses, because it's I've had it before. It's super yummy. Really, she's a graduate of the program here, but also I won't say I taught her anything about cacao. She's the one teaching me. Has a book out, and really just exploding with that. Also on next Thursday, April 6th, the Medicine Makers group is going to be talking about Florida Betony. Our rattlesnake root is just starting to get harvestable. It's all over the place at the classroom space, and I'm super excited for that one. And Ruthie's teaching that. On April 13th, Tricia will be teaching anatomy and physiology for the herbalist. We'll be covering the nervous system, which all of us need to do. And Gray, who teaches all of our Ayurvedic classes, on Thursday, April 27th, is going to be actually looking at essential oils and marma therapies, and specifically focusing in on lavender and rosemary, kind of opposites there. And boy, I can't read my own handwriting. That's pretty bad. Well, we're doing something on Friday, April 28th. I am sad to say I have no idea what it is. This Sunday, though, I'm going to be out. I'll be there for the morning and probably the late afternoon over at Three Daughters Brewery, Pints and Plants. There's kind of a street festival with, I think there's like 30 plus vendors, lots of plant vendors, some cool local crafts, and that's from 12 to 5. It's free to get in there, and I'll have all kinds of cool medicinal plants there, and happy to chat about them. And if I'm really bored, I'll even do an herb walk if you come over and ask me. And if I'm there, I'll have ear seeds and magnets if anybody's stressing out or anything like that. And I'll say, put on your list, the Green Thumb Festival is right around the corner. That's April 29th and 30th at Walter Fuller Park, and we're gearing up for that. It is I believe, the largest plant festival in Florida, if not the Southeast. It's like 50 to 100,000 people, every imaginable plants, edibles, medicinals, ornamentals, and that's bad. It just crashed. No, it didn't. Okay, good. I thought it did. And then, of course, our ever so excited 17th annual National Herb Day, and that's going to be at the clinic at 2520 Central Avenue in St. Petersburg. It's a free event. It goes on all day Saturday, May 6th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. There'll be 2 lecture tents, about 20 plus vendors. Everything's free. You can come for an hour, come for a day. Everybody there will be somehow plant related stuff. We won't let vendors come in if they don't have something to do with growing plants or there's even somebody who makes jewelry out of plants. And the 2 lecture tents will be our senior students presenting about the subject of their choice, as well as them presenting their products. So it'll be their first official product that they'll make, and they'll be able to represent that and ideally sell it if you want to come out and support all the students who are up and coming in our community. All right, so I'm going to say it one more time. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to post it on the comment section there, and I will add it to the queue. All right, and I'll say I don't see any questions yet on there, so I'm going to start babbling. And what order do I want to do these in? That's always the trick. So somebody asked about neuropathy, and specifically looking at neuropathy for using soak or topical herbs. I can safely say that my number one herb to go for, whether we're using it as an infused oil or in a soak in water, but St. John's wort topically I've had phenomenal success with, and I'll rattle off a few others here in a minute. But one of the things that is important, if we're dealing with neuropathy, it's important that we ascertain why, because there's so many different reasons why people get neuropathy. And I usually think of it being bilateral in both feet, and I think they specifically said feet, but you can have neuropathy in your hands or feet. Diabetes that's not being properly managed certainly can lead to that numbness, tingling, heaviness. Some people describe it as like walking with pillows strapped to your feet. In more advanced stages, they say a brick tied to their feet. And it can come from uncontrolled blood sugar issues. It can come from side effects of chemotherapy. It can come from a side effect from surgery where they damage the nerves. any number of other reasons why there's blocked blood flow, deep vein thrombosis that wasn't caught soon enough. I'm sure there's a few other reasons why that can show up, but I'm going to say that the chemotherapy and diabetes are certainly the most common causes of neuropathy. I will say for topical use of herbs for neuropathy, my number one go-to is St. John's wort. And St. John's wort is a much maligned herb. It is a wonderful, safe herb if you're not on prescription medications or you're using it externally. The internal use of St. John's wort does come with cautions if you're on any prescription medications, to include birth control. Unfortunately, one of my another acupuncturist, I guess she's not technically a graduate yet, but she's still a student. She has St. John's wort tattooed onto her arm because she's got St. John's wort twins. So it's real, people. But if you're not on any prescription meds, it is super appropriate to use St. John's wort internally. And my favorite use is actually nerve stuff. It can be used for, everybody knows St. John's wort's for depression. Even within the realm of depression, there are many different types of depression. So I always think of kind of when somebody says my nerves are frazzled, or we're looking at kind of that melancholia, that kind of Eeyore symptoms. You can buy, or you can make, if you're able to get some good St. John's wort, but St. John's wort oil used topically should be applied once or twice a day, ideally twice a day, but that's not always practical. And the oil that you do use, whether you buy it, I know Red Moon Herb has some, and a few other people. We've got it that we make it here at the clinic. We actually get it shipped to us fresh. And the oil should be red in color because there are many different species of Hypericum, but not all of them have the same profile. Sorry, random people coming out here. So, hey. So, it's the yoga classes arriving. It's okay. Ignore me. Everybody online knows that there's a yoga class happening. If I have to, I'll spin around. So if your oil isn't that nice, deep, rich red, it's probably not very good St. John's wort oil. You can also make an infusion, a really strong tea of it to soak your feet in. And I would say if you're going to do a soak, there's probably a number of other herbs that can be very helpful for that. And I totally don't remember if the person who asked me this question was Chinese or Western herbalist, so I'm going to put a little bit of both in there. I think calendula is a great addition. And in Chinese herbs, I really like the huangs. So anything that's got berberine in it or yellow in color. So huang qin, huang lian, or huang bai. You can use Oregon grapefruit or golden seal. I tend to steer away from golden seal just because that is very expensive and is not being commercially grown enough yet. I'm not sure if it's still on a threatened species list or not. I'd like to reserve that for very serious issues. And one of my favorites also, Chinese herb, is safflower, not saffron, but safflower, way cheaper. And that's Hong Hua in Chinese. And let me write that word because not everybody knows what I'm saying in crazy Chinese land. Hong Hua is safflower. And the other thing I said were the huangs, huang qin, huang lian, and huang bai. I don't believe you need all of those, but it is helpful to have one or two. So I usually use the huang qin or huang bai. It's not uncommon for people to get some pain or spasm, and so things like Jamaican dogwood can be really helpful. Interestingly enough, kava is a great thing to use topically if there's spasm. Things like toothache plants, spilanthes, can be helpful. All right, not everybody knows what spilanthes is. Spilanthes is a great one to add into it. We can use any of the plants that are in the xanthoxylum family. So we've got wild lime here. I can't even think of the ones that are up north, the tree, but there's a couple of trees that are in the xanthoxylums, are all good additions. And one of the things I always caution people about, obviously internal, diet modification, exercise, controlling the blood sugar to make sure you're not getting those big peaks and valleys, is super important. But as the neuropathy goes away, when it's uncontrolled, there's not good blood flow, the nerves are starting to starve, for lack of a better way to think about it, it will go from pillows/bricks strapped to your feet to all of a sudden it'll actually get uncomfortable, almost like a pins and needle unpleasantness that will start to show up. So I caution people at that. That is part of the process of healing with it, and usually anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months that will shift. The more St. John's wort that you add topically, the oil, or the soak if you're using all of those other herbs, the faster that will transition, and of course the more you control blood sugar. Internally, for diabetic neuropathy, I like alpha-lipoic acid. I like a B complex, because everything from B6 to B12, B1, B2 are all helpful for neuropathy. And so rather than trying to regulate those or get expensive testing to see which ones, most of us need a B complex. L-cysteine can be helpful, NAC. You can also use L-lysine can be helpful to restore some of those tissues that have not been healthy. All of those can be helpful. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few others. With blood sugar, essential fatty acids, so fish oil or plant oils can be really helpful. And one of the challenges is when somebody's on medications is being cautious about herb-drug interactions to make sure we don't interfere, that those herbs are processed too slow or too fast. And when somebody's prescribed herbs, and they might be on Neurontin for the nerve pain, they're probably on more than one medication for the blood sugar issues, probably a cholesterol med, and some of those, the blood sugar medications in particular, if we dramatically change their diet, if we use herbs that are helpful for blood sugar, it will help the neuropathy. But one of the things that will happen is their blood sugar may drop too low, and blood sugar being too low is just as dangerous as blood sugar being too high. So it's important, as we start to correct the diet, regulate the blood sugar levels, that we're able to continue to monitor on a daily basis blood sugar, so that we're being careful not to drop that too low in the process. Recognizing it's got to be long-term lifestyle changes that don't stop any of those medications abruptly, especially Neurontin or gabapentin. Both are frequently used for neuropathy. A dramatic stopping of those medications can cause seizures, so work with your doctor stopping things like gabapentin, which is used for nerve pain but is technically an anti-seizure medication. So cold turkey stopping that, bad things can happen. So work with your doctors, or taper very slowly off of that as you start to improve the circulation to your feet. Watch your feet. Soaking your feet for long periods of time can cause some wrinkliness. You want to make sure that there's no wounds or infections on the feet. If it is a blood sugar issue, we have to be super careful with that, because you may not feel any kind of infection. That's how people lose their toes and more when they've got really advanced blood sugar issues. The other big reason I see neuropathy in the feet, and the hands for that matter, is chemotherapy. It is a common side effect that happens about 2/3 of the way through chemotherapy. There is a new approach that a number of the oncologists that I work with have started suggesting, and I didn't think it was worth a hoot. And I've had a couple people who went ahead and did it throughout their chemotherapy, and it managed to prevent any neuropathy in their hands and feet. And that was alternating hot and cold baths every day, ideally twice a day, through their entire course of treatment for cancer using chemotherapy, and to continue it for 3 months after your last chemotherapy treatment. One of the things that we see with chemotherapy is you get to the end, you may or may not have some rough side effects, but those side effects sometimes continue to advance for a couple of months after you've done your last dose. So the benefits of chemotherapy, but also the side effects, will continue long after that last side effect or that last dosage. So I consider it really important. We're safe to use topical herbs when dealing with chemotherapy, but internal herbs we have to be very, very cautious during chemotherapy, and I would say 2 to 3 months post chemo before we can really do some more aggressive herbs to correct things. Ideally, I always say when we're concerned about herb-drug interactions, herbs that are bitter or herbs that are sour are best to avoid. Those can change the speed at which medications are absorbed or excreted through the body, and that's where we end up in trouble with those narrow therapeutic margin herbs or medications. And I'm just going to, before I go too far down the rabbit hole with anything else, I'm going to say please post any questions you may have. I tend to go too far down the rabbit hole for a lot of folks, so depending on where your skill level is, I'm super okay doing basic questions, and I've got a few that I'll cover as well, but I always like to, the folks who bother to show up, I always like to make sure that I cover the stuff for that. With the post-chemo neuropathy, and I do say post, so looking at 3 months post-chemo, and all of those same supplements and herbs can be very effective. Your B complex, your alpha-lipoic acid, your NAC, acetylcysteine, L-lysine, and there's a few other amino acids that I can't think of off the top of my head, and fish oil. I actually like high-dose fish oil as long as you're a couple of months post. I'll look at, without even blinking, I would say 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams of essential fatty acids 2 to 3 times a day. Super appropriate to go up from there, but we always have to check and see what else is going on. One I didn't mention either is vitamin C. Either oral, obviously watching for bowel tolerance, so too much vitamin C you will get diarrhea, but it can also be done IV. So for somebody who has a port put into their chest for the chemotherapy, it's very easy to go to a functional medicine doc and they can do high dose vitamin C after blood testing. That can be really helpful for both improving the efficacy of chemotherapy as well as helping with the side effects. But interestingly enough, vitamin C, both orally or IV, can be really helpful in minimizing the side effects of blood sugar issues as well. I've watched a few interesting workshops from the Westing Price Foundation. Excuse me, it wasn't Westing Price, it was the Linus Pauling Foundation, that they were comparing diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, but specifically they were talking about type 2 diabetes as being a type of scurvy, that a lot of the symptoms are similar to that, and so that the high dose of blood sugar, the body's failure to keep up with it by producing enough insulin, is stripping the body of vitamin C, and so we get all of those same symptoms that we get with scurvy. So I was fascinated by it. I cannot say that I don't do IV therapies, that's reserved for the MDs, but I really appreciate the addition of that into protocols when you have an MD, functional medicine doc, that you can work with on that for doing that regular stuff. Ultimately, the real fix is diet change, nutritious diet, exercise, and in the case of chemotherapy related, it literally can just be a matter of sadly 1 to 2 years before those symptoms resolve on their own. So if it was me, I'd want that to resolve as fast as I could possibly get it. All right, I think that's all the craziness I'm going to do with neuropathy, but the neuropathy ties back in. So the next question, and I will say I'm going to do that station identification. So please feel free to post any questions. I'm happy to answer questions about Western herbs, Chinese herbs, acupuncture, and our Florida and Caribbean herbs. I wish I could say I knew a lot about Ayurvedic herbs. They're not my specialty, but there's a lot of crossover, so I might be able to say something to those. Make sure I didn't miss anybody's questions. Oh, y'all are being too easy on me. So somebody posted a question about, they were asking specifically about brain fog associated with post-COVID syndrome. And I'll see if I can't go beyond the COVID, the post-COVID brain fog. That's certainly a big one. And I think the American Herbalist Guild just did a workshop on that, and I hate to say it, I missed it. I think I have the recording in my inbox. I need to go look at it, because whoever was teaching it, I was super excited to see it. It was either, might have been David Winston, it might have been a woman whose name I forget, or KP Kalasa, all people I have a great deal of respect for. So they probably looked at it in a slightly different way than I would. So as we see the winding down of COVID, it's still out there, but it seems like the newer strains are maybe a little bit less contagious and not as scary as that first year or two that we were all dealing with COVID junk. Most people at this point have presumably either had a vaccine or gotten COVID or both. And have some level of immunity to minimize the severity of COVID infections. And I will say, people are still catching COVID, but along with it, the flu's out there right now. I understand it's a pretty nasty strain as well. I still don't understand why, as far as I know, I have not gotten COVID. I've had people literally leave the treatment room and test positive to COVID within 2 hours of leaving my office, and somehow I'm going to say I washed my hands a lot and took a few supplements prophylactically, and every time I felt like I had so much as a sniffle, which is pretty much every day, that I've taken a few things, usually Chinese herbs or some crazy formulas that I put together on my own. I've managed to, I think, avoid it, although it's certainly possible to have asymptomatic, no symptoms, cases of COVID. So I haven't bothered to go get tested for antibodies because I don't like going to doctors. So there's been such a range of symptoms. The World Health Organization has put out a list of symptoms that can be expected post-COVID. We have the Department of Health as regularly posting new additions to the symptoms that we have out there. And unfortunately, even people with fairly mild cases without needing hospital intervention or medications, some of the side effects have been lingering for long periods of time. So the chronic post-COVID syndrome and things like that is really been debilitating for a few people. And we see everything from fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue-like syndromes, to heart and lung damage that seems to be permanent, to brain fog, to loss of smell and taste, and the list goes on. There's menstrual irregularities, infertility. One of the other interesting ones, some chronic gastrointestinal issues. And I wish I could say there is a clear predictability of who's going to get what symptoms. Without a doubt, people who are older or have multiple chronic health conditions are at higher risk of either serious outbreaks or death from COVID. I know it's like, isn't everybody sick of hearing that word at this point? Maybe there's COVID fatigue caused by hearing the word COVID too much. But we're seeing even some of these problems in younger, generally healthy folks. I have my own beliefs that as a culture we have critically low vitamin D levels. It's allowing for COVID to set up camp, if you will, or secondary, tertiary viruses, bacteria, fungus, things that we're probably have yet to discover, and I'm not even going to pretend to predict what those are because I don't know. Kind of like when we talk about Lyme disease, it's no longer it's just Lyme disease, it's Lyme disease with its co-infections. I think we're going to find that COVID has co-infections associated with it, Epstein-Barr or whatever, that is using COVID as a pathway in to set up camp. But I think so the low vitamin D is probably predictable, or weakened immune system, or multiple medications. The most common one that I've seen that seems to be, and this can be from medication, or it can be from long-term stress, or use of other things. And for those of you who've been here before, I apologize if I rant about this too much, but the low stomach acid seems to be having a dramatic effect on the severity of it. And so by using antacids, and whether those are your H2 blockers or PPIs, the proton pump inhibitors, or the so acid reflux meds basically, that part of the way our body's responding to COVID has some of the same pathways, and through literally eating the virus. We didn't wash our hands, we have a sandwich, we pay with cash, and then we don't wash our hands, and we lick our fingers to turn the page of a book. And our stomach acid, if it is not adequate, it's the role, one of the many roles of stomach acid is to sterilize our food. And so we're literally swallowing it, and it is able to get into our system through the digestive tract. So ensuring that we're not taking alkaline waters, we're not taking alkaline pills, or pills, prescription medications that are subduing our stomach acid. And if those are necessary because of anything from stomach ulcers to actual excess acid, which is very rare, low stomach acid is more common, trying to correct the underlying imbalances that are leading to those digestive issues. So I'll jump right to brain fog, because that was the actual question that I had. So with brain fog, I usually find, and it can come from the COVID itself, or it can come from the treatments. Unfortunately, inappropriately, frequently, antibiotics are sometimes being given for COVID, or a lot of people are ending up with like bronchitis or pneumonia after they recover from it. Oops, sorry, babbling. I almost missed a question. Hey. Sorry, I'm going to stall and read your question real fast, and I'll write it down. Which herbs I can grow locally in South Florida? Ooh, cool. Oh, awesome. I will happily answer those questions. And that's 10A. 10A, South Florida. All right, I'm going to get to that one after I babble about post-COVID-y crap. So one of the things I found is that a lot of phlegm is created by the treatments for COVID, or the treatments for the other issues that come up, like bronchitis and pneumonia and so forth. So certainly gut dysbiosis, so making sure that your good gut flora is correct, I consider that really important. And so taking a good probiotic, and which one's the right one? I actually think you should run through a variety of different brands, especially if you've taken antibiotics or had food poisoning or anything like that over the years. There's still doctors out there prescribing 1 to 2 years of antibiotics for things like acne, when it's so much easier to clear up acne with dietary lifestyle changes and a few really boring herbs. So how do we help with phlegm after that? There's any number of herbs that can be helpful. Within the realm of Chinese medicine, I'm a real fan of the herbs that are in Six Gentlemen. Let's see if I can spell this, which is Lu Wei Di. Oops, not Lu. Junzi Tong. Tong for those of you who are Chinese medicine-y folks. So that's Six Gentlemen. So things like tractalodes, which is Baizhu, becomes very important. Huang Qi is really important. That's astragalus and atractalodes, two really important herbs. We can use one of my favorites, and this is not a political statement, Biden's alba, and I would say any of the Biden's plants. And this is also a Chinese herb, Xian Feng Sao. If you want to read more about that, there's not much written in Western herbs about Biden's alba, but there's a great deal written by the Chinese, and if you dig pretty deep in the old Google, you can find some stuff. There's also a good deal of research on that. It's mentioned in Harold Bruner's book on herbal antibiotics, as well as one of the herbs for chronic Lyme disease. Sometimes the phlegm is really sticky, and certainly if there's lots of sinusy stuff, but signs of phlegm that aren't as obvious unless you've been trained in tongue diagnosis and energetic medicine, you may not recognize what phlegm is. And so it can be clogged sinuses, it can be chronic yeast infections, toenail funguses, it can just be brain fog. One of the indications is a thicker tongue coating, so the thicker your tongue coating, the greater the amount of phlegm. And so kind of like look at your tongue coating and three of your friends and compare. So a thick, dry, sticky tongue coating may be really hiding some of that phlegminess. It can also be mucus in the stools. It can be loose stools with frothiness. Anything other than a perfect sinking brown log is, showing us something. Constipation can even be a sign of phlegm, especially that dry, sticky phlegm. So if, I don't think I said it, Biden's, I always say that lingering cough after a cold and flu, to include COVID, that is so effective. And for those Florida folks, actually Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, it's everywhere. It can be really just dramatically helpful. Hey, Craig. Oh my God, I do that so often it's embarrassing. I hate to say it, I'll be sliding through my comments and I was like, oh my God, I didn't want to put a, mad face or whatever. It happens all the time. I feel you. If I haven't said it, anybody wants to post a question, feel free to. I've got a couple in line, but I got room for plenty more. Glad you're enjoying it. Some really boring, easy herbs to use. Yes, all the cool ones, of course, but I really like sage, the stuff of turkey sage, not the burn to clarify your home sage. So that can be made into an infusion, a tea. You can chew it up. It's an easy one to grow. It can be used fresh or dried. I'm a huge fan of that for a lot of phlegm, especially for that upper respiratory kind of stuff. What else do I like? Pau d'Arco from South America is a great one to get things balanced back out. High dose essential fatty acids, those can be fish or plant oils, not to be promoting a particular product. I don't know them all, but as an easy one to find, that Udo's 369 is a brand that has a variety of different seed oils for the vegans who won't do fish oil, and I think that's a great one. And the dosage is, yes, don't be afraid of dosage with essential fatty acids. If you get loose stools, you took too much. What other things do I like for post-COVID? If it's the dry, sticky phlegm, and again, I'm cheating and using some Florida natives, Ceda Spa is great, and so any species of Sita, the cordifolia, rhombifolia, acuta, and I said that one, all of those can be helpful. The leaves of the plant don't contain ephedrine, and it's in the mallow family, so just chewing up the leaves can be helpful. It's also one of those that is used more in another tradition, so we can find more about Sita from Ayurvedic medicine, where its Sanskrit name is Bala, B-A-L-A. Hey bee, what's up? I got my friendly neighborhood bee. Are you gonna give me a kiss? I don't know why I like bees, even though they terrify me. So this is another one that's used for chronic Lyme disease. It's mentioned by Brunner, where you really are friendly. Hi. Don't fly in my mouth. If you need a stronger, where you need that bronchial dilator, that opening up of the lungs, if you're seeing that shortness of breath and fatigue, the roots do contain ephedrine. So there are some cautions with that. If you're on high blood pressure medications, you probably don't want to use that, and so ramping up your dosage slowly. It can be used fresh, it can be used dried, it can be tinctured. I'm a huge fan of Sita for a variety of different issues. Some of your adaptogens can be helpful. I've had a lot of people with spontaneous sweating and extreme fatigue that are post-COVID, so I really like Schizandra berry, which is also the Chinese herb. Hopes if I can spell it, Wu Wei Zi. And I'm sure I will not spell Schizandra. Oh, I'm pretty close. Schizandra berry. This is really helpful. It's interesting. It translates as 5-flavor seed, and so it helps to stop sweating from any kind of issue, but also considered an adaptogen, improves hand-eye coordination, and slightly moistening to the lung. Not dramatically so, but slightly. You can also use plantain, not the banana, but the pot herb, the weed, plantago. Whoops, not spelt right, plantago. There we go. And oddly enough, I just did a YouTube video about our Florida plantain here, which now is the time to identify it. It has a very distinct spike on it. If you're really lucky, you might even find the Plantago major. It's not native here, but you can find it in a variety of areas around Florida. It is naturalized at this point, and I consider it a treat when you find it. I don't tell anybody where my favorite patches are because you might steal the plants. I'm happy to say once you get some seeds going, it really will gonna take root. And if you don't know it, I always find the Plantago major has an interesting name, white man's footprint. It tends to grow where we tread. I would say that's true of our Florida species as well. And I believe we have at least, if we count the Plantago major, I'm going to say 3 species that grow here in Florida. But I found a beautiful patch of our Florida Plantago here. What other herbs are good for that? I'll throw in a little. Let's see. Chuchuhuasi is also a good one. This is a South American herb, especially if there's some heat. If you're running hot and a lot of that phlegm, maybe some fibromyalgia-like pains, that's a good choice. I'm always a fan of getting your vitamin D levels tested, making sure that's high. I rarely supplement with just B12. I usually look at a B complex, but getting your B12 levels with that brain fog and chronic fatigue. If you're on acid reflux meds and you do need, for some reason you need to continue to take those, or you have critically low stomach acid, which one of the most common reasons for that is long-term stress. I've started suggesting I'm having a harder and harder time of getting people's B12 levels up using methylcobalamin and so forth, and it's still not coming up. You may have heard of the MTHFR, also known as the motherfucker gene. Sorry, pardon my English. But it is when you have, I think there's now a third gene that's been associated with that. When one or more of those is turned off, put you at greater risk for a variety of chronic diseases. So you can certainly get tested for that. But I've started more and more often suggesting people get injected with B12 whilst taking a B complex to more quickly get those B12 levels up so that your body can produce the hydrochloric acid for the stomach, so that you can do it without the B12 injections. Ultimately, for somebody who's not been supplementing with B vitamins and has been eating vegan for more than a couple of years, there's a risk of that as well, that we need B12 to produce our hydrochloric acid, and you need hydrochloric acid in order to absorb your B12. It's part of the intrinsic factor. And so once you get critically low, and I would say anything under 500 is critically low, that it can really be a challenge to get going again, even if you've started supplementing. And the other question was things you can grow or some good sources for plants in South Florida. And I'm super jealous because jealous and not jealous. I happen to know a lot of the plants in South Florida and the Caribbean. I grew up in the Bahamas and was lucky enough to learn a lot of those plants and a lot of the travel through the tropics. I've continued to learn more from native folks. And first I'd say, you already got a ton of plants there. The trick is to learning about our local Florida natives, and certainly I talk more Central Florida on the West Coast here in St. Pete where I am. Ignore that car pulling up behind me. Hope it didn't run over anybody doing yoga. But you're loaded with medicinal herbs. The native people here, long before the Europeans showed up, for 10,000 years or longer, they were sitting there treating every illness that came down. The problem is we've lost that knowledge. There's very little of that's been passed on. We can recreate it through other cultures that have similar plants or the same plant along similar tropical latitudes. Stuff that grows well there that maybe is not native. The root beer plant is one of my faves. Root beer plant is, is it Ojo or Oja? I want to say Oja Santa. It's also called false kava, which I find an insult to this plant. It is a piper. I think I'll probably spell the Latin name wrong. Piper. Okay, I think I should have had an I instead of a U there, or an A instead of a U there, but I'm close. And this is probably better than kava in some ways. It can also be used for ceremonial purposes as well as medicinal and recreational. It's very, very easy to grow in South Florida, and it comes from Central and South America as well as Southern Mexico. It grows like gangbusters here. In a hard frost, you'd probably lose it. I'm oddly here on the coast in St. Pete. I'm in the southernmost end of the peninsula of St. Pete. I consider myself a zone 10A or 10B as well. So it is phenomenal flourishing. Also, there's simple things like toothache plant that I mentioned earlier. Spilanthes is great medicine, also tropical. Ashwagandha from India grows very well down here. Cedar does really well in Florida. What other fun ones? Andrographis pedicularis. I think I spelled that wrong. That is the Chinese herb. Xuan Xin Lian does well. In the right environment, wild violet will do well. That's also a Chinese herb. Zihua Diding. What other ones do I really like? Some of the tropical ones. Oh, the gamalami, the gumbo limbo. If you're anywhere near the coast, I guarantee that's already there. That is in the same plant family as frankincense and myrrh, and so that is used for everything from the antidote for poison wood, which, depending on where you are, you know what poison wood is. It is used for arthritis, pain, sunburn, for spiritual purposes. It's burned as smudge. That's phenomenal. South Florida also. I always talk about Ligdum vitae. This is the national tree of the Bahamas, national flower of Jamaica. This is sometimes called Northern Palo Santos. This is a oil-dense tree that I wish there was more. I have 3 growing right now. It's used for spiritual purposes. It's burned just like Palo Santos, and can also be used for antiparasitic, arthritis pain, and a bunch of other things. Epazote is also another antiparasitic that is native to the area. Very easy to grow. It should just started to be coming up here. This is one that you can grow in a pot. I like to just throw the seeds out in the backyard and it'll start growing. Handles full sun, crappy soil. Lemongrass, of course. All right, you don't need me to write lemongrass, but I did it anyway. Hopefully I got enough juice. Ooh, I am not going to make it on juice. All right, we may have to go inside. How much juice have I got left? All right, we're going to try to get through, but I don't think I will, so we may have to get friendly inside with folks, as I don't have an outlet out here, and I didn't bring my battery pack. Oh no! I've got to go a little bit longer, and I'll do my little station identification as I run inside. What else do we have that's down there? I don't know. That's probably enough to keep you out of trouble. But look at your native plants. Go to a native plant nursery, and there's going to be a ton of things that you can find. One of the biggest considerations that we look at is sun or shade, what kind of quality soil you've got. Certainly things like wild yam. Here in my area, we've got a native plant nursery that I get a lot of my stuff from called Sweet Bay, just over in Bradenton. It's about 20 minutes from me. So finding a native plant nursery near you can be great. Oh, skullcap. I found there is a Florida and a Cuban skullcap, Caribbean skullcap, all the same properties. But I always love to go to strictly medicinals. That's where I get a ton of my plants from. Their seeds are first rate, they're a wealth of knowledge, and they've got some really good stuff. I find weird stuff in other places, but they're hit or miss. I just had somebody who accidentally brought some guanabana and jackass bitter seeds across the border, so talking to friends who are going overseas, coming to a different area, and having them bring some fresh seeds can always do really well for you. I'm going to fiddle fart while I go here, because holy crap, I'm going to need to plug in, otherwise this is going to be really short. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to post them while I pretend to pack my stuff up, and I gotta keep my pen so I can write questions. And but I'm gonna go inside. I know where the plug is. Hopefully there's a space at the table, but I'm gonna find us a place to hide. Should have brought my battery pack with me. Sitting here at Tiki Tavern was not planned until right beforehand, so I get to go for a ride. I was enjoying myself outside here. So what I will do is I will usually do a 7 o'clock station identification. If you don't know, I am Bob Linde from Acupuncture Herbal Therapies and the Tradition School of Herbal Studies, and I don't have enough hands. Wow. All right. And so Tradition School of Herbal Studies, Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies, and this is our Herbalist Open Forum that we do the last Friday of every month. And we've got lots of cool things coming up, so you can check out our webpage at traditionsherbschool.com. Wasn't plugging my computer because I didn't have enough battery power.
Oh, okay. They're probably going to be out there hanging out in a minute then.
Oh, that's funny.
Are you still on?
Yeah, I got another hour to go.
Is that one on?
Yeah, that one's, if you
Okay,
could be
yeah,
so
I think
kind.
that's off.
Oh, sweet. Thank you. All right, we're back. So we've got lots of cool classes coming up. We have classes in Western herbalism. We have a lot of one-off classes that are all online and in person. You can find out more at traditionsherbschool.com. We've also got Ayurvedic classes. Again, those are one-offs. They're open to anybody. And we've also got both a Western and Chinese herbal programs that are about 2 years long, that are one of the few clinical programs in the country, i.e. we have every one of our people who goes through the entire program from beginner to practitioner literally gets to at least a year, usually longer, of weekly clinical practice, as well as 1 weekend a month. We have our intensives. I'm hoping this is charging now. I think it is. Plugged in. Yay, good. The joy of the internet. So you can find out about all of our cool classes coming up at traditionsherbschool.com. If you want to get in to see one of our awesome practitioners, we have herbalist and acupuncturist and spiritual worker, Alyssa. You can contact the clinic through acuherbals.com, ACUHERBALS.com. Or if you're interested in seeing one of our students, you can see, hey, good. You can see one of our student practitioners and ask for the student clinic. It's just $15 to see one of our supervised student clinics. Wow, there's a really loud car back there. And also 1 night a week, I am supervising acupuncture interns. So it's a way to get low-cost acupuncture treatments. And again, they're supervised by me or one of the other senior practitioners. AcuHerbals.com, Tradition School of Herbal Studies, whichever one you prefer. All right, now let's see. Oh yes, and for anybody who's just joining us, feel free to post a question, and I will keep going with all of our cool stuff. And I think, who was that? Adriana, I think. Hopefully I answered your question. Let me know if you want more babblement, but I will certainly babble more. One of the things that I think is really important as we start to explore herbal medicine, so many of our books and other things, so many of the teachers out there are talking about plants that are from Europe. They're talking about plants that grow in the Northeast, and too often we're not attached to any of our plants that grow in our local area. And so if you're in Mississippi or Georgia, you've got different plants growing there than I do here in Florida. South Florida, you got all kinds. Actually I'm growing mahogany as well. But there's so many plants like sea grape, mahogany, lemongrass, smilax that are native medicinal plants that are just as powerful, if not more so, that have long histories and traditions of stuff. So I'm always a fan of, yes, I like to grow weird exotic stuff too. And one of the best ways to learn your plants is to grow them and watch them go through their life cycles, to taste them in person, and it will change your understanding of the herbs oftentimes. One of the plants I recently have gotten to grow is cat's claw, una de gato, Uncaria spa. I don't remember which species it is. This is gokung in Chinese herbal medicine, and the way I've used South American cat's claw or legato or the Chinese gultang, I've always thought of it as this antimicrobial, reducing blood pressure, spasms, and so forth. And about a year or so ago, I was gifted a cat's claw plant. And it is a vigorous grower here, to the point where I have to keep it contained. And as I started to pull the leaves off just to taste those, and that's not a part you normally have as an herb of commerce, I've been fascinated by the intense minerally flavor of it, the cooling, moistening, and nourishing properties that I've never understood from the dried product that I get when I just buy a pound or two of it somewhere else. So I think it is important, if you're going to use this as a form of medicine, that if you're going to see clients or treat your friends and family, that we take the time to learn our local plants, and also from a environmental, ethical standpoint, to bypass looking at those, I'm getting all these cool Chinese herbs. Well, guess what? Those have to be harvested from China, dried there, processed, put into a ship to be shipped over here over however long it takes from there, and all the fuel that's used for that, then put into a distributor in California, then divided up and retested there, and then it sits on a shelf in a warehouse until I get it, and then hopefully I use it as quickly as possible, versus walking out in your backyard and picking some weeds. Like, ultimately, I would argue the plants that are growing within a few miles of you are the most powerful plants that you can get. So taking that time to find your bioregional plants, or finding those plants that grow on a similar latitude, can really make a huge difference. So and it's challenging. One of my favorite resources for that is, oh my God, I can't believe I can't think of it. There's a great book on tropical plants, and I'm embarrassed it's on the Traditions Herb School website. I have a link to it, and it's completely flown out of my brain. And I will say, please feel free to post any of your questions. Oh, you know what I didn't mention? I didn't mention Herb Day. So let me talk a little bit about Herb Day as for a moment. So Herb Day was created about 17 years ago, and I'll give a little bit of the history of that. A number of the national organizations thought that we should get a national decree to really highlight herbal medicine. One of the things, and I'll quote David Winston on this one, that he said, these days herbs are really herbs are really popular these days, but herbalists aren't. And so the American Botanical Council, the American Herbalist Guild, United Plant Savers, the American Herbal Products Association, and a bunch of other initials and letters got together and created a national decree. It was originally in October, and I started the very first year that they created this national decree. I started celebrating it here in Tampa Bay region. And a bunch of the plant growers got upset. They were like, this is our harvest time. We don't have time for doing this BS. So they switched it to the first Saturday in May. So it's now the first Saturday of May. It's stayed that way for many, many years. And the idea of National Herb Day is that every community gets together to celebrate herbs and herbal medicine in their own way, with the intention of education and community. And so we've been, I think, doing a pretty good job of that. We usually get 500 to 1,000 people to come through. It continues to grow every year, gets better and better, and really just never ending what we can do during that. And I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to actually next year that we're going to have a new location for Herb Day that I'm expecting will double the number of vendors and probably the number of participants, and include things like herb walks and so forth, which so far I've only done one herb walk during Herb Day in the back alley by the clinic. So this year, I hope you can stop by. We now have 2 lecture tents out on the street corners that's available. They're all free. Everything, all the lectures are free. There's usually free samples. I make a lot of weird stuff. I definitely take to heart the idea of community and education. So I make a lot of weird Chinese herb foods. One of which is black chicken white phoenix soup, which is, if you want to learn more about it, it's Wu Chi Bai Feng Peng. Sometimes it's Pai, P-A-I, Pai Feng Peng. And this last year I was like, you know what, I also do royal black rice. I also make the red rice, that's red yeast rice. I've also made a bitter melon stir fry and a jellyfish salad, which is always strange, but somehow none of it's left by the time I'm done. And then last year I started making cool Bahamian stuff from that tradition and some of the medicinal foods and meals that we have there. My favorite being the chicken foot souse. And if you don't know what souse is, I think I'm spelling it right there. And so chicken foot souse is literally, it can be pig foot souse, chicken foot, chicken wing souse. All of those are basically taking the cheap parts, boiling them down with some onions and garlic and a lot of citrus, and doing that same concept of bone broth. And so it's helpful for collagen, recovery from illness, and really can make a tremendous difference. And I'm going to give a short plug for, so the proceeds support the Florida Herb Society and the Tampa Bay chapter of the American Herbalists Guild, so that they can bring cool classes and teachers and stuff down to do stuff. And I didn't mention it at the 7 o'clock hour there, but all of their events of the local chapter of the American Herbalist Guild is open to the public, so you don't have to be a member of AHG in order to come and play and learn about the herby stuff. Of course, we're going to put a shock collar on you and try to make you join AHG, and I know a number of people end up doing it just because of the wealth of information that's available as a member, and you don't have to have any special training. There's general membership, student membership, and professional membership. All of it gets you access to all the cool information that's on their site. There's years and years of classes and webinars and papers and research archived for members on their website. So our local chapter tomorrow night, I believe it's at 6 o'clock, is Sarah Ratza's cacao facility. She's opening up her warehouse and teaching us all the cool stuff to be learned about cacao. And of course there's free samples. I shouldn't say that. There's samples. So really I think we're going to spend about 2 hours up there. You can check the Facebook page for information about the details. I think it's $15 for members to go, and I think it's $25 for non-members, and that gets you lectures. She's going to talk about the spiritual uses, the medicinal benefits, how to make it. I believe most of her chocolate is both gluten-free and dairy-free, and I'm pretty sure I'm right to say vegan. So she definitely makes some that are more for the general public, that are not her preference to make, but you know, we all got to pay the rent. But she also does a lot of them that are more traditional, with a little bit of cayenne pepper in them, with mostly cacao, and using something like coconut milk or coconut fat to cut it and make it a little bit more absorbable in the cacao into the liquid. I was going to talk about that or that. Which one shall I do? Oops. My backpack. Oh, there's my backpack. All right, I'm not going to grab it. So if anybody has any more questions, feel free to post them. If not, I'm going to babble incoherently. I've been asked recently to talk more about kava and kratom, and I don't even know where to start. So oddly enough, I started here in a kava bar tonight, just because I thought it was going to be quiet here tonight, so sorry. And next time I'm going to bring my battery charger so I can take it out there and stay the whole 2 hours. But once again, kratom is very controversial herb that is continually being attempts to ban that herb, to ban any access to it, and the reality is it has a long history and tradition in Southeast Asia, and interestingly grows very well here. Actually, add that to your list of things that would grow in South Florida. Kratom would grow very well there, as well as Guayusa. Oops, those are two separate herbs. Those are not kratom Guayusa. There we go. I'm going to say kratom you can find online. We sell them at the clinic, and certainly, come up and see all the other cool plants, but we do ship those plants. But Guayusa is, I'm pretty sure I'm one of the few people in the United States that has that. I had to send to France to get mine and get them air shipped to me, and was able to nurse them back to health, and now have been propagating them for about 3 or 4 years and able to do cuttings and sell those. It's the national drink of Ecuador, Guayusa. So kratom is in the coffee family. And for some weird reason, the Tampa Bay region has the largest collection of kratom and kava bars in the country. Maybe only, I'm not sure if there's more in Hawaii. I'm sure there is in the South Pacific. But the reality is we have dozens of kava and kratom bars here, and not just a place to buy them, but a place to sit down. And we have ones like this that's more health oriented. There's ones that are country and western. There's a blues one. There's a more Key Westy style one. I haven't even been to them all yet. But all of them are very different. Some have music. Some are super busy. Some aren't. There's theme nights at all of them. It's really a hoot. And all of them serve at least kratom and kava. But many have other herbal blends that, especially if they have a little bit more experience in herbs, like a number of our graduates and our students are either own kava bars or are managers or kava tenders and so forth. So in general, the reason it's super controversial is it's being used recreationally. I enjoy it. There we go. That's mine. I enjoy it because it is a stimulant that helps me with ADD. If you can't tell from these alone, just with all the stuff moving around me and trying to move inside, I'm easily distracted. And so, in general, things like coffee, Ritalin. I've never tried Ritalin. I'm always said, oh God, you totally need to get some the ADHD meds. And my concern is that I'm going to really like it and never stop taking it. So coffee's great, but coffee's rough later in the evening, and too much can be a little rough on the stomach at times. So I find that kratom is actually a much gentler, helps with focus, and sometimes I'm on my feet for long periods of time or working out in the yard. It also helps maintain energy and helps with some of that mild sore muscles and things like that. So one of the things that it's more importantly known is it fills the opiate receptor sites. And so a lot of people are using kratom to effectively get off of either legal or illegal opiate drugs. And they're doing it without going through withdrawal, which is pros and cons to that. So if it's merely a physical dependence, then that's great. If we're talking about addiction where you actually have either a physical or emotional addiction to it, where you start to have symptoms of withdrawal with that, in the case of opiates, that can be pretty unpleasant. So they can effectively dose off of this. Some people use it in lieu of it as an analgesic or pain-killing medication that they use it 3 or 4 times a day. But the problem is, for 10% of the people, they will actually get a dependence or addiction to the kratom. So it is important for those people who have a tendency, an addictive personality, who have struggled with addiction in the past, specifically with opiates. you may still have to go through those difficult withdrawals. And so there's certainly lots of other herbs that can help with that, other things like magnesium that can be helpful. So recognizing it for a small proportion of people, they will end up with some dependence, so using it responsibly. There is some concern that we talk about mitragynine is one of the alkaloids that's in there that seems to have this opioid receptor function to it. That is the thing that also causes, in some cases, relaxation and so forth. I think there's well over 100 active alkaloids in there. But the 7-hydra, I forget the whole chemical name, or the 7 blah 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 alkaloid in there is the one that causes dependence and addiction to it. So one of the concerns is folks who are extracting or concentrating the alkaloids are able to manipulate it to make it more addictive, to create that dependence on it, which is a great business model, bad ethical model, and bad for your health. So I am a fan of ensuring that you're using only the plant. The leaf is the primary part that's used of this. And ideally, it's really funny, when kava and kratom both came into the United States, became popular, it was powdered. And the reality is, I tell people, don't use powdered, use cut and sifted. It's harder to adulterate, it has a longer shelf life, it doesn't oxidize as fast. And I was able to find some sources about 15 years ago of the cut and sifted leaf, and when I tried to sell it, even though it was better, more quality control, I'd say 95% of the people had no idea what to do with it. And so I literally ended up taking it home to myself. I had 2 or 3 people who would buy it. But it doesn't matter whether you're growing it yourself, whether it's powdered or just sliced up, it's tea. You're making an infusion with it. Ideally, it's a hot infusion. It extracts better in acid, so you can use anything from citric acid to ascorbic acid, apple cider vinegar, or any of your citrus fruits, although I don't recommend grapefruit juice because a lot of people who are using kratom may also be on prescription medications, especially heart meds. That grapefruit juice has an adverse reaction with a lot of those medications. It's not well understood why. It's only grapefruit juice, so you can use lemon, lime, orange, you name it. Those are totally fine to combine with your kratom. And ideally let it steep overnight. One trick that a lot of people use is freezing it, which breaks the cell wall open. So putting it in the freezer overnight or for a couple of days is an effective way to get a strong extraction. Or if you really want to be slick, you make that really strong extraction and then fill ice cream trays. And so you can pull out a 1 ounce basically ice cube and add that into your water, and that will be your doses throughout the day. It's a neat trick. You can do a number of herbs that way, that freezing them really helps to improve the extraction of a lot of the alkaloids with it. But the reality is, literally multiple times a year, multiple states and national level is trying to ban our access to another plant. We saw the fiasco of what yellow journalism and government intervention did in cannabis, that it is still at a national level a Schedule 1 drug, which means little to no research can be done. You need actual federal government approval to do any research, and so guess what? They found out it doesn't do anything because nobody's ever been able to do research, and it's a much maligned herb that, as we find out, as more and more states have some level of decriminalization or legalization of cannabis, pot for the rest of you, that it is highly effective for a variety of things. And again, that plant is being manipulated. The THC, the part that gets you high, is being concentrated, which is not always the best medicinal use. So it's all of those hundreds of different cannabinoids in there that are helpful. So as we see the government regulation that comes in, the argument being that people are having problems, we're not banning alcohol, we're not banning so many of our other addictive substances, so it's not about that. people are not dying left and right from kratom or kava for that matter. It's usually they start using other drugs or they're taking a single chemical extract, but it's usually other medications that are causing their adverse reactions. And the reality is they're choosing not to do research on it because it's such an effective tool for so many people, from anti-anxiety, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, ADD, ADHD in my case, as well as withdrawal from opiate drugs. And it does that in a safe manner. What I will say, it's somewhat self-regulating. If you drink too much, it will cause nausea to the level of puking. And if you drink it too fast, you might get a little lightheaded, but you're very likely to vomit from it. So when somebody's looking to try it, I always talk about make sure you have some food in your belly the first time you try it and see how you respond to it. Also, sip it slowly because it does taste like crap. It's a very bitter plant. And just monitor yourself with it. There are generally thought to be 3 different strains, and there's variations in that. There's white, greens, and reds. The whites are generally more stimulating and better for energy. The greens are kind of middle of the road and a good starting point, and the reds are more relaxing and better for anxiety or for pain that's really interfering with things like sleep. All of them kind of do all of it, but with a slight different emphasis on each one. One of the things, check out the American Kratom Association. They do a good job of keeping, making sure that legislation isn't passed to once again ban another plant. And if you think plants can't be banned, there are many plants that are banned. Things like mugwort are banned. I believe it's Alabama. Damiana is banned. In some places, kratom is banned in Sarasota County, just a 30-45 minute drive south of here. And every year there's another attempt to do some sort of end run to either in a county or the entire state of Florida to ban this herb as well as many others. Kava, we had a similar kind of thing. Luckily, there's less efforts to ban kava in the US, but back in the 70s, we had poor quality control. And so in England, the British Herbal Society found that there were these bad articles being written about kava as the health food age, resurgence of herbalism in the world, and the United States in particular. And so they were like, wait, this herb's been around for thousands of years. How could it be causing this problem? And what they found was there was bad quality control. When we look at kava, the Piper methysticum, that we only use the below ground parts. We don't use any of the aerial parts. And that plant, depending on the subspecies, can be like 20 feet tall. It can be a huge, huge plant. So people with poor ethical practices is harvesting the whole plant, drying it, grinding it into a powder, mixing it with the root. Then you can't tell the difference once it's mixed. You have to do some fancy lab testing, chromatography, and so forth. So people were either using really ridiculously high amounts, or they were getting really poor quality and usually inexpensive herbs that were using those aerial parts. Or there was a few cases where they were using acetone, the stuff that you take paint off the wall or fingernail polish that is causes liver cell death, causes cancer, all kinds of yucky stuff. They were extracting the alkaloids with that and then trying to cook off the acetone, and sometimes trace amounts were left over, causing some really bad adverse reactions. At the time in the 70s, there was a single case of a death associated with kava, and what they found out when they went and researched that particular case was that they had found a bottle of kava at a car accident. And if we're going to use that as our criteria for associated deaths, then we can say that McDonald's French fries are killing people every day, because I'm sure they're finding some Slurpees and Big Macs and all of those in cars after a car accident. So ultimately it was banned in Germany, it was banned in Canada and a number of other places. The British Herbal Society was able to stop it in the US and some other places, but sadly it's still banned in some of those countries. It's still banned in kava as far as I know. We saw ma huang, a great Chinese herb, Ephedra chinensis, is still banned in the US. It's legal for an acupuncturist to get hold of it, but it's illegal to import it. So we haven't seen ma huang in about 10 or 15 years. So what we find is, for usually all the wrong reasons, the federal government is trying to ban herbs. Education might be good, the quality control might be good, but that's not the aim. They want to restrict our access. And to say herbs are bad, they're trying to protect us. They're not banning oleander. They're planting those in the medians of the highways. They're not banning angel's trumpet. They're literally putting those as beautiful ornamentals and sell them at Home Depot. And there are multiple deaths every year from kids using it because it's also a hallucinogen. So the reality of safety and risk factors based on the percentage of use, those are way more dangerous plants for both animals and humans. And there's no movement for those to be banned. So the argument of safety is, without a doubt, not at the forefront of what the government's trying to do. So it is one of the arguments, and I'm going to sneak back outside. I got enough juice on my, and it's a cool interior here. There is enough juice in here that I can finish this outside and hopefully not drive anybody out here insane. So, hey, you're not going to mess with it. You can even chime in questions if you want, because herbs are cool. Oh, I know, it's hard with the AC thingy there. There's nobody talking at me, so they're only typing their questions. So I'm just stalling and ranting about kava and kratom at the moment. You missed my kratom rant. So the reality is, the idea that they're doing it for safety, education would be a better thing, in the same way that they're slowly loosening the ideas of the safety of cannabis. And what they're trying to do is try to make sure that people are using it safely and responsibly, rather than arresting people and filling our prisons with something that is plant medicine. So, and it's also important when they look at, the FDA is coming up with all kinds of interesting fear-mongering about plants. And if you've ever heard my herb-drug interaction classes, you've seen me get my hackles up a little bit on that. Because the reality is, when they find adverse reactions, it's usually not to plants. It's usually, and there are exceptions to this, it's usually that they're finding a chemical extraction or a nutraceutical, i.e. Vitamin, mineral, but the nutraceuticals are things like they're concentrating chemicals and calling those a natural product when they're far from natural. And they're marketing those as cures for cancer and things like that. That's where the real dangers are. But when we look at the adverse reactions associated with plants, it's very rare, and it's usually from people who are doing herbs and drugs together, and they're doing them in absurdly large amounts without any training or experience. So a good warning label might go a long way, and more education about herbs, hence my free 2 hours babblement every month as we go through this. So. And for anybody who's just jumping on, my often quoted David Winston quote of herbs are popular, but herbalists aren't. So I know the AHG just did a talk about training in herbalism, and somewhere on YouTube I've got a cool video about that that's been popular, and I thought I'd babble a little bit about that as well. And there is no single path to becoming an herbalist. There are many approaches, many traditions, and all of them are effective. And we can go to formal schools like, yay, traditions, and get a formal education. There's places that you can get a bachelor's or master's degree in herbalism. You can go to acupuncture school, and about a quarter of the training there is in herbs. You have to take a board exam on it, and all kinds of cool stuff. There's also lineage, where your mother or your grandmother has 10 generations of herbalists in the family, and they know their native local plants. And I would argue that's some of the best knowledge that can be passed on, that every time that line and that tradition isn't passed on, there are literally centuries of knowledge that's never been written down that's being lost. self-study is probably how most people do it. And so going through and taking webinars, now there's books, there's the internet, some of that information is good, some not so good. And the different schools of thought and traditions. So Chinese medicine, obviously, I'm a fan. Chinese medicine comes with a diagnostic system and classical formulations, but it's all in Chinese and weird herbs that most people don't know much about. Ayurvedic medicine, and that's from India, and herbal medicine is a part of it. They have massage therapy, yoga practices, food therapies, meditation are all part of Ayurvedic medicine. Their herbal component is one small part and a very important part of it. There's also there's Persian medicine that, again, is hard to find anymore, that so much change has happened through the Middle East, through the Crusades, so much of that knowledge was lost. Anani Tibbs, that's kind of Greek, the European medicine. Here in the US, we have everything from Thompsonian medicine to the eclectics. And one of the things that we see a lot of people using is medical herbalism, where we use blood work and medical diagnoses, and through research and PubMed, we find herbs that help a specific condition, where we might use yellow dock to increase iron levels for somebody who's anemic. We find that trophorestoratives and adaptogens, and those are using more medically kind of approaches to things and combinations. So obviously that requires some medical knowledge and be able to read blood work, and ideally be able to get it, be able to order blood work. So one of the things, which one's the best? I was going to say the one you have access to. And for most of us, we take a variety of different things. Most of my herbal knowledge for the first 15 or 20 years of study was through research, self-study. Down in the Bahamas, I learned a great deal of my tropical medicine from No Boodle, and a number of other herbalists or Bahamians down there, as a little bit from the Haitian community that was the migrant farm workers down there. But I got more formal study from a variety of conferences than acupuncture school, and doing lots of herb walks with lots of people everywhere. And now that the internet exists, even better. So there isn't a single better path. The one that works well for you, yay, there's online courses. I couldn't study online. I would go insane. I would fall asleep within 2 seconds. Somehow a number of you have stayed awake through all of this 2 hours of babblement. So the reality, find your local resources, find the process that works best for you, and that's going to be the better one. Hey. That's all right. Ignore my babblement. We got a small crowd, and I'm almost done because my battery's almost dead again. So, and if anybody wants to post a question, feel free to post any questions you want on there, and I will certainly answer them. So I'm going to say that probably one of the things that there isn't a big enough emphasis is your bioregional plants. So I'm going to say no matter where you live, find all of those plants that are growing native within, say, a 10-mile radius or 20-mile radius. And it can be going on local herb walks. Here in Florida, eattheweeds.com with Green Dean is a great resource. Check out the traditions page. Obviously, I have a bunch of videos on our YouTube channel. And I just had a lot of fun going out and doing an herb walk in Boyd Hill Nature Park here in St. Pete, one of our little gems. So finding people in your community that have the local knowledge, that have the indigenous knowledge, is ultimately the best starting place. I also think going to conferences is phenomenal. I'm going to say too much about the American Herbalist Guild. Their conference is in Colorado this year, but you get herbalists from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, that are wonderful. Lots of schools represented, lots of teachers. And that's a great place to explore what's the best pathway, the best system for you. Also, I'll be up at Medicines of the Earth that's coming up soon in Asheville. That one's more medically oriented, but lots of herb walks. David Winston's there, my herbalist man crush, and there's also internationals coming up. I believe, I forget whether it's June or July. International is every other year, and it's for real international, not just Canadian or something. They'll have people from Africa, Russia, you name it. There are a lot of South American teachers there that are doing both physical medicine, energetic medicine, and spiritual medicine. And all three of those are important. You know, most people have an emphasis on one versus the other. So I definitely have my greatest emphasis on energetic medicine, the idea of hot, cold, wet, dry, deficient, excess, intense, and lax. But I also know medical herbalism and some spiritual herbalism. So they all have a role and a place in any practice. Usually we just kind of focus in one place or another. All right, I'm going to take one more question here, unless somebody posts something. I've gotten a lot of questions lately about Hiccup Girl, and I guess there was some articles and books written recently. Some of you may remember Hiccup Girl made the national news, was here in St. Pete. Jennifer Mears, I think was her name. And I had the pleasure of treating her, and after a bunch of people did stuff, I saw her, and it was funny, I was a very new practitioner at the time, and I had to, nobody sees chronic hiccups, that's such a rare thing. She'd had it for a couple of months at that point, and I researched every possible acupuncture combination, herbal formula that I could use for it, and I came in, or she came in and just hiccup in the storm, and I did a complete intake on her, and it didn't match any of the patterns I looked at, and so I came up with the idea that she had had a number of illnesses beforehand, that a virus had encapsulated itself on her phrenic nerve, which is a branch of the vagus nerve, and was causing the spasming of her diaphragm, which is a hiccup. And so I gave her a really good antiviral. I gave her a formula called Andigraphis formula, also known as Xuanxin Lian Pian. Oops, I forgot a letter there. Shin Lian Pian. Also known as Andigraphis. And gave her a probiotic, and she stopped the next day. And about 2-3 days after she ran out of the herbs and she didn't refill them, her hiccups came back, so then she got surgery and cut her phrenic nerve so that she stopped hiccuping, which is horrifying. Unfortunately, if you stop there, then it's a great story, but if you read the story about 5 or 6 years later, she was 18, got into some trouble, and scammed somebody with 2 other people, and they killed the guy, and so now she's in prison for life. So it's a sad ending to the story. So the reality is I am regularly getting a request from people of like me or my relative or friend has chronic hiccups. They've had them for years, and there's no single approach to it. Anything from stress to mineral deficiencies to my weird approach to it can be the right one. So finding somebody in your area that has a unique set of eyes on it, and acupuncturist is a good starting point. I actually have now treated 4 cases of chronic hiccups, and my approach on every single one was different. That's really the magic of energetic medicine. It's about figuring it out, solving the mystery, and treating the people as it's appropriate. So because my battery's about to crap out, and so is my voice, so I'm going to wrap this up. If you don't know, I'm Bob Linde from Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies and School of Herbal Studies. If you're in our area, stop by and say hi. Check out our over 800 herb dried apothecary, our about 150 native and not native medicinal plants that we grow in our plant nursery in the back of the clinic, or check out the myriad of classes we've got at our Tradition School of Herbal Studies, where every weekend probably we're doing something somewhere, and a lot of Thursday and Friday nights. And we've got 6 days a week. We have practitioners in our clinic for herbs, acupuncture, and spiritual work, as well as our reduced rate student clinic 3 nights a week. Just call, schedule an appointment, and get into whatever is the most appropriate for you. And we do this the last Friday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. Or sometimes I cut out a little bit early because my voice is tired. So you can find all of our archived ones on YouTube for the Tradition School of Herbal Studies YouTube account. I hope you subscribe and check out all the other ones. I just posted 2 videos this morning from my little herb walk down at Boyd Hill, and I'm going to try to put a few more out here that I got pre-recorded. So until next month, unless I see you sooner, I will say good night to you all.